Hi, everybody. This is Joanne Manister, Science Goddess with Read Science, and my co-host Jeff Schomeyer is joining me. I'm sitting in Illinois, and Jeff is near Washington, D.C., and our guest today is Liz Heinecke, who is in Minnesota. I love the internet. And Liz is a returning guest. She has been on before because Liz has written so many books, and it's amazing. And so Liz is the author of many, many books, including this one. Today we will look at primarily biology for kids. Happy to have this book as a biologist. And then we'll bring Jeff, our physicist, along to yeah.
I get to play Dr. Watson today. It's like, I'm sorry, can you explain that biology to me?
I think this book is great
Yes.
for this. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio in the back of the book, which I thought was actually
Sounds
fun.
good.
Liz Heinecke has loved science since she was old enough to inspect her first butterfly. After working in molecular biology research for 10 years and getting her master's degree, Liz left the lab to kick off a new chapter in her life as a stay-at-home mom. She soon found herself sharing her love of science with her 3 kids as they grew, journaling their science adventures on her online educational platform, kitchenpantryscientist.com. Her desire to spread her enthusiasm for science to others soon led to regular TV appearances, speaking engagements, and her books, Kitchen Science Lab for Kids, Outdoor Science Lab for Kids, STEAM Labs for Kids. Oh, I have this one. I have most of your books, Liz, by the way, but this one I could find this one. Star Wars Maker Lab. This was cool that you did this with DK. Yeah. Kitchen Science Lab for Kids, Edible Edition, the Kitchen Pantry Scientist, Chemistry for Kids, and Radiant, The Dancer, the Scientist, and a Friendship Forged in Light, an adult nonfiction narrative about Marie Curie and Loie Fuller. And this was a diversion from your other books, but very good. I enjoyed it. So, but we see you are set up with all your experiments. And along the way, I have some questions because you've done this a long time. And like, what have you learned? You're probably like really good at this now. So, Jeff,
Yeah.
but I'll let you, or Liz,
Okay.
You can say hi to everybody.
Yep. Welcome
Everyone,
back,
glad to
Liz.
be here.
Yeah, it is nice to see you again after it's been quite a while now since your I think your first book for kids, Kitchen Science for Kids, and we had a little chat at the kitchen table. That was a lot of fun.
And a guest, you had one of your kids with you.
Yes, and as the physical scientist, I did learn a lot of things from this book, and I'm very happy to have done. And I have sometimes my questions to begin get a little out of hand. So I have a very easy question, because I think this is where I'd like to start talking about this book, which is out of the ordinary for the sorts of things we usually talk about, but a very, very nice book and one that kids can enjoy. So this little set of questions, I want to emphasize the subtitle of the book, which is Science Experiments and Activities Inspired by Awesome Biologists Past and Present. And now I want to have a clearer idea of the book as we talk about it. So would you just give us your marketing overview of what age kids the book is for, the activities it's aimed at, and also about the very handy and unique format of the presentation?
Yeah, so I think the target age, according to the publisher, is sort of 7 to 12. But I always tell people there's a lot of wiggle room on both sides. I've actually had a lot of adults tell me that they really enjoyed reading the biographies of the scientists in this book.
Yes.
But I put it together. I've always loved, even when I first started writing books, I really enjoyed sort of researching the people who came up with the concepts I was talking about and who experimented with them and wrote about them. And I think that storytelling is one of the best ways you can teach science. And I think that hearing a story of how someone discovered something, or reading a story of what someone worked on, and then actually taking those concepts and finding a way to let kids try a hands-on project related to that work, whether it's something, whether it's an actual science experiment, yes, like making agar plates and growing microbes, or whether it's a project like some I'll show you today that just help kids. A lot of biology is really hard to, if you don't have a microscope and expensive equipment, it's really hard to explore it. So I really looked for ways in this particular book that kids could safely explore the concepts. I have a balloon with cornstarch goo in it that serves as a model of a macrophage, so kids can explore phagocytosis. Because it would be great if you could say, hey, just get out your microscope, grab some white blood cells, and let's play with this. But kids can't do that.
We don't want bleeding anywhere.
Yeah. But I had a lot of fun, actually. It's fun to look at historical experiments and try to sort of reproduce them. So I had fun trying to come up with some for this book, and I'll show you a couple of those. But I really wanted to integrate the story of scientists with hands-on projects to make science more memorable and more interesting and more inspiring for kids, because I was able to feature a lot of scientists that a lot of people don't know about, who are really important scientists who are overlooked, because of racism or because of gender, for whatever reason, they've been sort of overlooked. So I wanted to sort of highlight some of those scientists as role models for kids.
You've got a fascinating collection of people in here. And I think I agree with you very much. I don't like to think of science as a history of personalities and discoveries, but science is done by people, and hearing the people's stories are certainly a part of that. And there's some very interesting people in here. And since you mentioned the diversity of the science and over the time scale of more than 100 years, I thought that was a very admirable thing about this book. And also, I want to commend the illustrations of Kelly Ann Dalton.
Yes.
Particularly.
What a team effort. This book.
Could you, Joanne, if you can find Lab 20, what did I write down the number? Anyway,
Esther Letterberg.
Here it is, Lab 14.
I will get it for you.
Find the picture of Lab 14. There she is. Okay, I want to talk about her as an example. She was one of my favorite examples.
Oh, sorry.
But first,
the camera on this platform is
first about the illustrations. I think it's worth making a positive comment that you have worked hard and found lots of interesting people with lots of diversity and background in gender and ethnicity and all sorts of things. And I loved the illustrations, and not least because it showed us that diversity without having to make it something that had to be discussed in the text or something, not as an avoidance, but just as a built-in part of everything that's happening. That was really brilliant. And
I love this.
The illustrations are lovely. She did a really beautiful job with all the little symbols and things. So it becomes almost I don't know what the game with kids is, but looking for things in the pictures, the little symbols and the little things going on, to see how they associate with the person's biography, are really terrific. And one of the ones that I really remember is this Lab 14, which was inspired by Susan LaFlèche-Picotte, who is from the Omaha tribe in Nebraska, born in 1865. And you gave us her biography, where she became interested in public health, and also developed a keen interest in houseflies as a likely vector for diseases in domestic settings, and introduced the idea of using screen doors to keep houseflies out of the house. And I loved the activity you suggested in there, where kids make flies from clay and Q-tip legs, and it involves an ink pad. I wonder if we could use that as a model to describe how one of these labs is presented. If you'd go over that for me.
I don't have that particular project with me, but I love that project because I try to find things that kids can really relate to. And every kid has seen houseflies, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really fascinating. I mean, putting screen doors in houses is similar to hand washing. It's a very inexpensive thing you can do to make a big difference in prevent the spread of some diseases. So in this project, kids build I mean, I have some Play-Doh here. I don't have any Q-tips, but I can demonstrate it. They build house flies out of Play-Doh. They will put a head, you know, it should have 6 legs. It has 2 legs. With little like recycled plastic wings on it.
Well, they've researched online to see what house flies look like at this point.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Online. They recreate a house fly with cotton swab feet. And then they draw some, on one piece of paper, they draw some food, for example, and another piece of paper, on the same piece of paper, they don't even have to draw it. They can take like some paint or ink, which represents something like rotten food or feces, something that has, you know, bacteria in it, microbes in it that can cause disease.
Yeah.
Then they put the feet of their fly in the paint, and then they buzz their fly around, and it lands on the food they drew. But it's a really great way for kids to see how flies can carry disease, and it was fun to write about. I try to, when I can, add some little, you know, gross details like flies.
Yes.
Yeah, about how their mouth parts and how they're always licking their feet, and they digest a lot of things by actually vomiting on it, and then to dissolve it. So that was a really fun project where I could talk about an interesting, important scientist, and then have a project kids could do to really explore how houseflies spread disease by microbes around from one thing to another.
Kids love the gross details.
They do.
And sure. I was thinking about sort of stereotypes of kids from when I was a kid. Even it's like everybody had a science fair, everyone built a diorama with dinosaurs, or you know, whether Coke dissolves nails and things like that. And they all seem, later on, they're almost embarrassing sometimes because they seem simple and simplistic. And it's like, it would be very easy to look and say, really, a clay fly with Q-tips and you dip it in. But these provide memorable examples that you can hang real information on later.
I actually saw an early review. I think it was from a librarian, maybe, that simple. They're not really, you know, science experiments, but I actually think that some of these, they're not, you know, everyone wants science to be fizzing and exploding all the time. And I do have a lot of projects. I try to find projects that are super engaging, but often it's, you know, it's simple illustrations like saying, this is how, you know, this is what a coronavirus particle looks like. I just made it out of Play-Doh with little Play-Doh spikes. And this is how a white blood cell might engulf a coronavirus particle. I talk about the scientist that Elie Metchnikoff that discovered phagocytosis, how a macrophage I think I lost my video. And then
you're coming back.
Talk about how they can spit them out and represent them.
Yeah.
And I also talk about antibodies. And then kids can building little simple clay models can be really interesting. I can talk about how Joanne Almeida, who discovered coronaviruses, I talk about the scientist and coronaviruses, how she used molecules called antibodies, Y-shaped molecules. Antibodies are complicated, but kids can learn their Y-shaped molecules that can attach onto foreign invaders and make them clump together so that the immune system can recognize them, you know, for example, if you're vaccinated, but also so that they can be more easily recognized by white blood cells. So it's a great way to sort of help kids integrate a lot of concepts and get their hands onto them and then if they're interested, they can go online and look at amazing videos of, you know, macrophages gobbling up bacteria or whatever they want to.
And all the aspects of, I mean, you call them activities, experiments and activities is a way for kids to make these associations, build these images, put things together, and doing things with your hands is an important part of that too, right?
Right. And there is an issue with biology because it's usually not today. We are going to do this in 1 hour. You need days, weeks, months, years. You know, we just observe a bear today. You know, you need a lot more time to really understand how bears grow and eat. And
And I do have activities. For example, I talk about Ray Wynn Grant, who is a wildlife biologist, and she studies carnivores, which is awesome. That's super inspiring for kids. Yeah, Joanne, maybe you can show the picture. I have it.
I've got it. Yeah. Here we go.
But
Here's
for
me.
her, I talk about the activity is for kids to actually, observe animals and do activities. But also, there's a simple activity you can do that I think I learned from one of the citizen science projects, where you just put some cookie crumbs in a plastic bag and leave it out on your sidewalk, and you can see, how many ants come, what kind of ants come. So you have to find simple versions of the, often very exciting science that adults are doing. But it's a way, watching a squirrel in your backyard is the starting point for observing a grizzly in the wild someday, or tracking it with, a radio collar when you're an adult, possibly. And it's really about sort of sparking kids' interest.
Yes. The hands-on experience. And we can attest that actual real scientists build models. They're not often out of clay and sticks, but they could be.
It could be.
Sometimes they're more
I've seen everything.
And most of the scientists I know usually, especially the theorists who say, well, this is how, here's a model I've made for how fluids worked, used to be something in particular. And that would usually refer to it as a toy. Having the aspect of play is important, because that's how the scientists would build a model that's not quite right, but maybe has a few characteristics. They think of it as a toy, as something that you play with, and you get insights from doing that because you put things together.
Yeah, and it, and it's also, you can incorporate some fun into it. So, for example, these balloon white blood cells, macrophages that I made. I have kids in the book. I have kids mix 2 parts cornstarch with 1 part water, and they make this non-Newtonian fluid, which all kids love to play with. And that's biology. It's a plant starch. It's chemistry. It's
physics.
So I don't. This is in a lot of my books, and I don't explicitly talk about the science of cornstarch goo in this book, but it engages kids to want to try the project, and then maybe they'll learn something about white blood cells. So you try to make it fun and educational at the same time, because I think I'm still like a 9-year-old kid at heart. I do try to make all my projects, fun as well as educational.
Well, I do want to ask about educational. So I thought, wow, you've published so many books so far. Do you ever have a teacher say, hey, we're using this in school, we're using this in our classroom, or a library or science museum, saying, yeah, we have a camp and we're going through your book?
I do. It's great. And I have lots of, I know people who run summer camps. I know kids who run their own camps. And what I often do is they'll ask me to do it, and I'll say, I can't do it because I'm really busy, but I'm going to tell you how to do it. And because lots of the projects can be scaled up really easily. The red cabbage juice that you can put in little cups. Add vinegar to one, it's an acid-base indicator, it turns bright pink.
Yes.
Add baking soda to one, it turns green. Combine them, there's a chemical reaction that makes carbon dioxide, it bubbles over. But that is one that kids love. It's easy to do with big groups of kids. I try to keep my stuff not expensive for the most part, so that all kids can do it and that teachers can do it in school, because they all have limited funds too.
I had a conversation years ago with a colleague about things that are good for bringing science to very young children. And I want to see whether you agree, because I think you do hear that we might be on the same page, that some people would tell us, like, well, these are unfinished stories. You haven't explained everything clearly. And we felt then that something like jigsaw puzzles that just use the names of chemical elements without further explanation gets these vocabulary things out. The names are funny and fun to say, and they become raw material for later more learning. And so the learning comes in layers and not as single episodes that cover everything. And you've got all these activities, that the fly with landing on the poo, that's going to give something for kids to hang on to. I think that sounds like sound pedagogy. I guess you do too, Joanne. I guess you do too. Yeah.
Well, I have, my kids are all grown, but yeah, I have 4 kids who would have loved all of this.
I think that's true. when you said that, it sparked a memory. Like, I think when I was really young, I read A Wrinkle in Time, and I became obsessed with the word mitochondria. And I
Yes.
had no idea what it meant, but it made me interested in, whatever science. I just thought, oh, science is cool. Mitochondria. I think kids do love words, and I think that's a really good point.
They're funny
Yeah.
and cool. And once you know them, then it's a connection ready to plug into something.
Well,
Well,
when I do
and
science outreach, I always use the scientific names for chemicals and have kids repeat them after me, and they love it. If it's a really long word, I'll break it up into syllables and sing song it back and forth. But kids do, they really respond to that.
Yeah, I noticed that in the book, and in a way that would be, hello, parents, here's a quick message. There are these words and they're left unexplained. Don't worry about it right now. It's part of the fun, and it lays the little Easter eggs for the kids to enjoy later. And they're fun to pronounce, or to try to pronounce.
Totally.
well, that's one thing in biology you might remember studying is vocabulary is a big part of it. And some people get overwhelmed in biology studies because they're like, there's just so many words. There's so many, new words. But I think if you're introducing it when they're young, and it's really helpful. Might take away some of that overwhelm when they get older in a biology class.
I say that all the time. And I tell parents this, I tell kids this. I say, the idea is to get kids, when kids do science at home, it becomes interesting, it becomes exciting. And then when they do have science classes when they get older, it's not as intimidating. And I think that's really important.
And it helps with the overwhelming part too, because when I would talk to people about reading science books, particularly textbooks, if I were talking to a student, their biggest anxiety seemed to be this, like, I read this chapter and I didn't understand everything. It's like, science books are not meant for fiction style reading. You approach them differently, and it's okay if you don't understand everything the first time. Sometimes you accumulate the pieces and it can be a while before they all come together. And so you just need to relax some. And so if you have a past with activities like this that can help get you past the anxieties of not understanding everything immediately, that's a great burden in the avoiding the overwhelming feeling, Joanne, I think.
Right. And actually, it's interesting. So I think back to your kitchen science experiment book, and I believe that's why you were on in the first place. And then it was the STEAM and then chemistry. And now we're finally at biology. So it is interesting because of the nature of biology, how maybe it took you a while to get, how can I do a biology book?
Yeah, it is somewhat intimidating. But then when I started doing it, I realized that you don't, like I said, you don't have to actually have a microscope or do the actual experiment. You can really explore the world of biology in other ways. I mean, I love, one of my favorite scientists in the world, who I know Joanne also knows, is Danielle Lee.
Danielle Lee, she's so wonderful. We know her personally.
Yeah,
Cool.
You
and
got
there
it.
she is.
There's
Beautiful
like,
illustration.
She is one of the nicest, smartest people you've ever met. She's an amazing educator too. And
right.
I actually talked to her about, what project do you think would be good to pair up with you? And she immediately said, my favorite project for kids is to have them look for 4-leaf clovers. And I talk about this in the book more extensively, but I love it. She talks about getting interested in science as a kid, partly because of looking for 4-leaf clovers and pattern recognition. And she talks about the importance of pattern recognition in science, and whether it's physics, whether you're looking out at the stars and looking for similarities and differences, or whether you're looking at a patch of clovers or a monolayer of cells. Scientists' job is to notice things that are different, right?
Yes.
Great
Or
point.
interesting in some
It's
way.
universal.
So some people might say, oh, that's a simple experiment. But the more I talked to her, the more I realized how it is a perfect experiment for this book. Even though she studies pouched rats, this is a very sort of experiment that all kids should do, just to sort of open their eyes and to help them understand sort of what scientists do And all kids love to look for four-leaf clovers. So I think it's a perfect experiment, actually.
Actually, one I liked, which I went, well, darn, I didn't learn this till university, was the gene expression with Legos and Jacob Renault. And, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, Legos. And boy, I wish I had that back when I was trying to get the lac operon in my head.
I know, I had a couple of biologists say, that's really great. You know, you have kids doing gene expression, but I'm a really visual person. And what always helped me the most, you know, reading science textbooks was looking at the illustrations. And I think that's partly because the illustrations simplify concepts without the vocabulary. So then you can go back and sort of learn the vocabulary. But the idea that I think there are you could do a lot of molecular biology, gene expression, cool stuff with Legos. I think it would help, you know, even college students understand it better and more quickly.
These days, I'm working in disability support at the university, and the concept, the idea, the thing that we remember that swirls around a lot is that different people have different ways that they take in information better, and the more of those channels you can stimulate, the better. So yes, reading the textbook, but having the pictures tells you things in a different way. It's not an old-fashioned view would be, well, it simplifies something, or no, the way we look at it now is that it uses a visual channel, and then you have the kids building these flies or looking for clovers. There's the activity involved. That's another channel. There's the touching and the manual activity. That's another channel. And you know, I'm glad we have a chance to explain this to people who might say, well, but what's the point of this book? Why do you build clay flies with cotton swab legs and look for four-leaf clovers? And it's because all of those things are foundational inputs for understanding, for feeling and experience how you go about doing science. Looking for a four-leaf clover is an activity, and it does have, as you say, many. That was a brilliant suggestion on her part, that it has many things in common with the way scientists go about doing science.
There are layers of understanding, and sorry.
Oops, did we have a video glitch here?
Little glitch, sorry.
That's okay. You know, Ramon y Cajal, he's one of my favorites. And, you know, and of course, he's known for his beautiful drawings.
Oh, they're gorgeous.
I was like, this is so great that this is in here, because, you know, every really good biologist who's more of a naturalist is a good either photographer or artist, you know, because we make observations and we need to record that. And I think that's important to have here too, like, so pattern recognition, but also we need to record those observations in some way. And who else was it? She did the butterfly life cycle, right? Caterpillar, butterfly.
Oh,
She's early on in the book.
Yes.
Same thing.
Maria Sibylla Marianne.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Very early on. And I thought, you know, the biological illustration. So maybe, you know, there are budding artists out there, and biology is a great, I mean, we always need medical illustration. Everything's not just taking a photo, or what now, of course, we can edit those images on a computer, but I feel like biology lends itself so well to a real artistic expression. Oh, you might be frozen, Liz. See if she comes back soon.
Well, at least she didn't freeze with her tongue sticking out.
Yeah, no, it's a great picture.
And the drawings and the photographs are important. I hear complaints. I imagine complaints of people. It's like, it's an easy way.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, let's see. We don't see you though, Liz.
But we can hear you for the moment.
Sorry, I lost you for a minute. Let me turn my camera back on. Hang on.
Okay.
But doing the illustration or taking the photograph also is good for the illustrator.
Yeah.
Because it amplifies the way you look at things and helps you to see things differently or in more depth or
Yeah. So,
I think it increases the looking experience.
so Liz, I don't know where we cut off at. If you
Yeah, I
had,
lost a little, sorry.
yeah, no, well, and I was just saying, you know, many biologists I know are great artists, or they're good at taking pictures, and how that's all part of being a biologist, right?
Yeah, it's all
I mean,
observation skills, right? And
all my research needed some photos, so with the electron microscope. So, you know, you can't just say, yeah, I saw it.
yeah,
You have to prove what you saw. So I'm many hours in the darkroom developing photos. That's how long ago I was working
oh yeah,
in grad school, you know.
that's so cool. Science is all about looking at the evidence, right? And you have to record what you learn. So I think,
Well,
and I often say either draw it or photograph it, you know, because I have three
Right.
kids and one of them hates drawing,
Yes.
but loves science and will happily take pictures of things. So I was going to tell you one thing about the illustrator, the process of doing the illustrations for these books. That's so fun is that I sent her a folder of images of the scientists and then images of, you know, the equipment they used, whatever they were studying, things related to their work. And then she takes that and makes these beautiful portraits. And she often does research on her own for like some of the imagery that you mentioned that's so beautifully woven into the portraits. So I think that lots of kids are artists and some of them aren't, and that's fine. But some kids can record things with words. It's just like we were talking about reading a science textbook. Some kids will record things with photos, some with drawings. So I think it's good to just celebrate, you know, kids embracing their strengths.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I agree. I sort of like this. I wouldn't have thought of this, but I could see this being fun, like making a neuron out of pipe cleaners. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had seen this project before, but I had never seen it I wanted to put a bead on it so you can see how the electrical signal travels.
Yeah.
And then
Very
it's cool if kids make a bunch of these. This is in the book. You can have them, you know, I can't hold this up, but you can have the signal travel. This one can pick up the chemical signal, turns it to an electrical signal, it travels. So they can set up a whole network of neurons. But once again, it can be hard to think about how, you know, one end of a neuron is next to other neurons and they can pick up chemical signals and turn them to electrical signals. It's hard to visualize that sometimes. So making these little pipe cleaner neurons and then setting them up next to each other and watching how the signal travels is really cool way for kids to understand how nerve cells work. I mean, I think it's a cool project, and they also make like a lovely little bouquet.
Oh, how nice.
Yes. Well, and they wiggle in a fun way and you can hit your brother with it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm sure that happens. So always curious, you have real kids doing experiments in the book. You just find them in the neighborhood or friends and family?
Well, for my first group of books before the Kitchen Pantry Scientist series, it was neighbor kids, it was my friends, my kids' friends, it was some of the kids, my photographer Amber Procaccini, some of the kids she knows from her photo shoots. And sometimes we would have 50 kids in one book, which was a lot of fun. But then the pandemic hit right when I was working on Chemistry for Kids, my first book in this series. So that book and Biology for Kids and Physics for Kids, which we just finished photographing, we did all of them out on our screen and porch. Or maybe, no, Chemistry for Kids was pre-pandemic. But we did them with smaller group of kids. And it was all kids who are neighbor kids and friends.
Okay.
And some kids that Amber, my photographer, knows. But we did all of them on the screened in porch. You know, the kids were masked, and then when we were taking pictures, they'd take off their masks. Luckily, by this year, when we were finishing up the physics photo shoot, we were all vaccinated. And we were outside on the screened in porch, so we could not be so careful. But it's all kids we know, and So
What a
it's lot of fun.
challenge. What a challenge. And you have diversity in the kids too.
Oh, yeah.
Which is great.
That's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
important. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we live in Minnesota, there are so many blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids that I'm always, diversity is really, really important because I want kids to look at the books and be able to see themselves in them. So I wish I could get even more diversity. I have to just keep working hard to do that. So.
Yeah. That's and I'm happy to hear. So physics for kids is the next one.
Yep, we just finished photographing it. It's all written.
All right.
Potato guns. Sounds dangerous, so maybe not.
Yeah,
Non-Newtonian fluids, I would hope.
Well, that's been in lots of my other books. I tried to do some new ones. The other thing is I really work hard to find, like I said, a diverse group of scientists and interesting scientists who do, and I try to include, some important historical scientists who a lot of people know about, Sir Isaac Newton or Galileo.
Where things come from. Yeah.
But I also have to find scientists that I can do something related to their work.
Yeah.
Which can be tricky in itself.
Yeah.
So, sorry, no non-Newtonian fluids in that one, but there's been several of my other books.
Right.
Okay.
But things, I suppose, like catapult or gravity and.
Yes. So pendulums, but
yes.
But also I did some cool things with slit experiments with light.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. I spent weeks on my kitchen table with sunbeams coming through trying to figure out like the best, easiest way to do those. Because a lot of those old experiments, they would darken a whole room and put mirrors outside to concentrate the light and have a pinhole coming through. And, I couldn't do that kind of setup. I have to figure out how to do this with 2 cereal boxes and an index card.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do spend a lot of time on experiment development, which is kind of fun.
It's nice. That's great.
There are
That's
some
great.
fun projects. I think that book is a lot of fun, actually. So you'll see soon.
I look forward to that. Yes, and I'll try not to be harsh.
Well, let me
doubt.
just tell you this. My dad is a physicist.
All right.
He was my fact checker, proofreader. So he's
it
very
helps
good with language too. So
it helps me a lot to understand, to approach this book and your books not as real biology experiments for kids.
Right.
I think once I see it as we've been talking about it, as playtime, as laying some foundation, as having fun and getting familiar with some things, it's exceedingly valuable, even if it's not biology experiments exactly.
Yeah.
For kids.
I do have some experiments. So
and right there, I'm thinking, should we keep suspense for Louis Pasteur longer, or do I remember correctly? This is Louis Pasteur here, his lab, I think. Yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to reproduce his swan neck flask experiment because it's really an important experiment in biology.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was trying to prove, life doesn't just spontaneously arise. So I figured out that, so I didn't have any apple juice this morning. I just used water and yellow food color. You need some kind of pasteurized liquid that has sugar in it, nutrients for bacteria. But basically, you fill 2 jars, you clean them in the dishwasher to kind of sterilize them. You take them out, you fill them with pasteurized clear apple juice. And then you have the kids, it's hard to see, but I basically have the ring lid on the jar, but I have saran wrap over it.
I see.
You poke a hole with a toothpick and they put a straw in it and tape around where the straw is. And then they have one straight neck straw so that microbes from the air can fall into the apple juice, right?
Yes.
And then they have one that's representing Pasteur's swan neck flask that's bent so that microbes can't, unless a very powerful gust of wind.
Yes.
Maybe, microbes can't get into the jar. And it's pretty cool. After several days, you will have a pretty nice, usually like clump of fungus or bacteria, probably a fungal mat growing in the jar. But So there are some for kids who want science experiments. They
Yeah.
grow microbes on petri dishes. I'm trying to think. I haven't done this. Oh, it was really fun I write about Mendel in the book, and
Yes.
we grew pea plants, and I'd always read about this, but I had never taken apart a pea blossom before and explored how he did his cross-pollination experiments. So I talk about how to do that. And
Yes.
we didn't actually cross-pollinate any peas, but I have kids take it apart. I have them paint the pollen from one plant to another, from one flower to another. So that's pretty cool, because you always read about these pea experiments, but I think it's not always.
Yeah, I've never done it. Yeah,
Yeah.
not even in any of my introductory biology labs.
Yeah.
I'm remembering the growing penicillin with a plastic bag and breadcrumbs.
Yeah, and I have that in the
But
book.
that's a real
Yes,
experiment.
you do.
Yep.
Yes.
The experiment lies not in the complexity of the equipment. It's
No,
the
and
ideas that you're
honestly,
exposing.
in my first book, I have DNA extraction.
There.
Yeah, it's really fun to grow microbes on little petri plates and see what grows. Kids love that. In my first book, I had DNA extraction, but I didn't put that in this book because that's a cool experiment. But one thing that I've learned by doing this and doing it with kids is that they extract the DNA and they're like, now what?
Yeah.
And I've tried to figure out ways to illustrate electrophoresis, like with strong magnets and, the iron filings you can get out of total cereal. I've tried a lot of things, but I haven't found a lot of good ways for kids to explore molecular biology, because so much of it involves electricity and dangerous chemicals. And you can't say, oh, go get some ethidium bromide and we'll
we can't do that.
But
At least you can do chromatography.
Oh yeah, chromatography, absolutely, and that's in a lot of my books. Patricia Bath. So she was a physician who invented cataract surgery.
Not you, Jeff.
So this is another more illustrative project. But kids can take toilet paper rolls and rubber bands and wax paper, put wax paper over the top, look through, and it's very hard to see. Things are blurry. So they can. This is about understanding the importance of scientific discovery. So then kids can take off the wax paper and take some saran wrap, cut out little squares. So this is representing how in cataract surgery they cut out the cloudy lenses using lasers and then replace them with plastic lenses, basically. So that's so kids can take the wax paper off, put plastic wrap on, and now they can see.
Yeah.
And that's it's a very simple experiment, but I think it gives kids, for one thing, empathy for people with vision problems. I mean, they can see how hard it is for people with cataracts to see the world. And then they can see that Patricia Bath, by inventing this technique, restored the visions of millions and millions of people around the world. And I think things like that are really important for it. When you're a kid, it's hard to see sometimes outside of your own sphere. And I think that it's really cool for them to learn about people who made discoveries that helped so many people.
But you also have, you don't just have to imagine this, do you? You have reactions from the kids who you're photographing doing this. How do they react? What do they do? What do they let you know?
Oh, they like most of the experiments. Sometimes it's boring, if they're just sitting here taping a straw to a jar. So, but you give them some non-Newtonian fluid, they go crazy. A lot of kids like making stuff. They had fun making these pipe cleaner neurons. One experiment that never, this is a classic science experiment that never goes wrong. But I talk about Ernest Everett Just, a famous cell biologist in the book. And he studied cells. So I can't say, go to your nearest tide pool and find some marine creatures and study the eggs they lay.
Right.
But I can say that he studied biological processes in eggs, in cells.
Yeah.
And so in my book, I have kids can dissolve eggshells using vinegar. It dissolves the calcium carbonate crystals. These I just started last night, so I can't quite get all the shell off. But they can take these, they're super fun to play with, right? Oh,
Yeah.
Squishy eggs that just have this cell membrane. They can rinse them with water. They can put them in corn syrup overnight to do an osmosis experiment. Sorry, there's a truck going by.
That's all right.
So they can see how water moves in and out of cells. Then they can take it, after it shrivels up in the corn syrup, they can take it and put it in water again. And I talk about the science behind it, the concentrated sugar, the water moves to the concentrated solution. Then they can put it back in water and see how the water moves back into the egg, into the model of the cell. So
I was amazed by that, because locked away in the physics lab, I didn't know you could dissolve the shell and not have the egg just sort of float away or something. I mean, that's just, I was amazed.
The egg and vinegar experiment, I remember from, it's one of my earliest memories in preschool. They did this, and I was just fascinated.
Yeah.
So I do try to include projects like this. Another fun one, have you guys ever done the thing where you, and this is in the book, I talk about Darwin. He was interested in the Galapagos, obviously, and how birds could have gotten over there. So he tested whether eggs could float in seawater.
Yes.
So it's fun. You can take a raw egg, put it in a glass of water, and add salt to it until the salinity is high enough that the egg will float.
Nice.
So that's a cool project related to Charles Darwin. But also, I discovered when I was writing my book Radiant that Marie Curie homeschooled some kids for a while, and that was one of the projects she did with them. And I just thought, oh, that's so cool. I just put that in my other book.
There's lineage, provenance to that experiment.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of the vinegar, I don't think you had this. One of my favorite is the chicken bone one, where you get it in vinegar and then it's like this, or you could bake the heck out of a chicken bone and it crumbles because the heat destroys the collagen, but the vinegar destroys the calcium carbonate. Yeah.
Oh,
so
that's a good one.
It's excellent.
Future books. I haven't done that one.
Yeah, I love that one. I don't know why, but of course, then when I'm teaching histology and I say, if you ever did that experiment, that's because this is gone, but this is still there, So.
Oh, that's a good one. I get lots of ideas from my scientist friends.
Well, and that does underscore the idea that these simple activities can be very memorable things, because here we all are remembering these simple activities we've done that illustrate that stuff.
Absolutely.
So I wonder, so you said you got the physics book coming up. Do you just have idea after idea, like biology for kids too, or,
I just signed a contract for another book in this series. So I do have 2 more books that I have ideas for. So I'll be working on those over the next year. But I'm taking July off. I need a break from writing. It's a ton of fun, but after I'm done with writing one of these books, I'm like, okay, I'm done with doing thinking about chemistry for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's fun. All the books obviously play into each other. And one thing that's fun about the books, because I do them in chronological order, is I can often refer back, and I do this a lot in the physics book, refer back to classic experiments. So not only does that sort of redefine things for kids, but then if they are interested in that thing, they can go back and say, oh, this is a project related to what spurred ever this thing I'm interested in. So, whether I'm talking about how in the physics book, how scientists study the signatures from the stars to see what's happening in the universe, I can refer back to other, the woman who discovered what the sun is made of in an earlier project. So it's cool in all these books to be able to, for kids also to see what scientists were inspired by other scientists that came before them.
Yeah, it's really, I did notice that this was in a chronological order, because, so then for a little while there, you just have white male scientists.
And I think that's an important pattern for kids to know. There are occasionally a few, maybe 1 or 2 women at the beginning of the books, but not many. And then by the end, I try to have it be mostly
Yeah.
women.
Yes, yes. And it's like it's sort of hard to avoid,
Yeah.
but for you to rectify that and to show the pattern, I think that's really important. So
And I don't
actually,
want to dismiss, obviously male scientists. I
No,
actually
no.
try to do,
Mhm.
they're usually like maybe one or two more women than men, just because I think there are more women that need to be recognized. But I absolutely have nothing
Yeah.
against male scientists. I try to keep it pretty equal because I want to inspire boys too, not just girls.
right, right. And we have a white male sitting here, so we can't.
Yeah.
Yes, and I don't think any of it seemed that way, and that's I
Right.
think part of my earlier observation about the value of the illustrations for showing that progression of diversity without having to spend pages and paragraphs talking about it.
Yeah.
It seems much more natural, and none of it seemed negative or exclusionary. It seemed
Yeah,
it
it's
seemed
great.
much more inclusionary, and that's good. And I think people, the current climate, people are starting to learn to accept or to appreciate that it takes a little more effort. But yes, these stories are there to find, and they're worth hearing about because it doesn't detract from anyone. It just adds to the body of all the things that we understand.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, most of the names in science that people recognize, maybe with the exception of Marie Curie, are white men. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't, unless often if their work is, really important in building the foundation of the story of physics, then I talk about their work. But
Yes.
I really think it's more important for kids to see role models who look like them. So
Yeah, and I don't know about there are two things I'm thinking about disciplines. One is as I was becoming a physicist educationally and things, I think maybe I was surprised by how ever present the history of physics is in just doing everyday work. It's like we feel all these people behind us. We know everything they've done. There are these connections. Most of our units are named for people who did experiments before us and things like that. And I think that happens. And also, physics has been going through this sort of reckoning of, every time somebody like, something like atomic bomb research comes up, we say, well, in the discovery of fission, for instance, look at this overlooked woman who actually provided all of the data for this person who then published the paper and became
Lisa
famous.
Meitner is in my book.
Yes,
Yay!
that's
I
right.
love her,
So,
actually.
well, those things are getting uncovered. We have more understanding when we see that. It's a process, I guess. It's exciting that we're doing it now, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a re-education, right?
Yeah.
For so much has been left out of
Yeah.
science.
And an enhancement. I can understand people who at first feel like this is somehow denigrating the contribution of the old white men, and it does nothing about that. It just enhances the context and finds more people with interesting stories, and it broadens what it is that makes science go, and the fact that anybody could become a scientist or something else. But
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
all about giving people opportunity. I mean, that's I think what I try to highlight in the book more than anything.
Yeah.
That for a long time, the only people that could do science were the super wealthy people.
Yes.
And that's why science is the way it is. And now, hopefully, we're moving into a new era where everyone has the opportunity to do science. So.
Right, and bring their new perspective, and that leads to new discoveries. So,
Yep, and not be discriminated against for who they are. So.
Yeah, so Jeff, I don't know if you had time to read Liz's a nonfiction historical book, Radiant.
I haven't yet, but it's in my reading list.
So this is a bit of a diversion from the kids' science. So you want to tell everybody about this book? I read it. I liked it. It was so cool to see this friendship between a scientist and a dancer. And wow, life was tough back then. That's one thing I got out of this book. I went, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's a book for adults about the friendship of the famous scientist Marie Curie, who was the first person to measure radioactivity. She discovered 2 radioactive elements, and then the Curie is named after Marie and her husband Pierre. He was also a brilliant scientist. They were a real team. But Marie became friends with this American dancer in Paris, who was the most famous dancer in Paris. a woman named Loie Fuller, who had basically invented modern stage lighting, and also gotten away from having dancing be, she turned dancing to art rather than just like women flaunting their bodies for men. She turned science to art. So she was very interested in any new science and technology. She was kind of like a Thomas Edison. She didn't have a lot of education, but she was very bright and picked up everything. So she wrote a letter to Marie Curie asking for she heard about this element called radium that Marie had discovered. She said, can I have some radium to light my dancing costume? And Marie said, no.
No.
I'm like working my butt off to extract like this much radium so I can, purify it, and characterize it. But they became friends, and were friends for the rest of their lives. Basically, they didn't meet up, every week. They weren't best friends, but Marie she was friends with Marie and Pierre. She visited their lab numerous times. Marie they meet up. Loie introduced Marie and Pierre to the sculptor Auguste Rodin. Loie was very good friends with him. They met up at his studio. Marie did after Pierre died. But it's really about women struggling to make their work known in a world that was completely controlled by men, and how a lot of women supported each other. But it's all set, I love art and literature. It's all set in this very rich historical context.
Yeah.
So,
but a lot of science loves Marie Curie and owns her because she's still the unique person who's won a Nobel Prize in 2 science disciplines.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, well, thanks for summarizing the book.
Yeah.
I really liked it. Like I said, boy, things were hard back then, and it was a lot of these struggles of women, like you said, trying to get their work known. Yeah. So I hope people, if you're looking for a good historical look at this friendship, this is, the only place you can get it.
Yeah, it's creative nonfiction. So
creative nonfiction. Yeah, so you had to take some liberties, right?
All of it, everything in the book actually happened. The only liberties I took were I invented some of the dialogue because I'm a fiction reader primarily, and I wanted it to read like a novel. In part also to get hopefully some younger readers to read it. I wanted it. I love historical nonfiction that reads like fiction. So
right.
But everything that happened in the book, it's all based on fact. I spent a year researching it, and every scene I wrote it like a play. Almost every scene was an event that happened. All the people I knew, every name I mentioned, it's all fact. So
yeah, so I knew Loie Fuller's name, and I remember that famous image of her.
Yeah.
With the, it's
on
just
the poster, on the
French
poster.
Yep. And but that was it. So it was nice to learn more about her. And I imagine you have some dancers who've picked up this book.
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
A lot of dancers have liked it. Oh yeah, so the New York City Ballet posted about it on their Instagram, and
nice.
I also got one of the big theater websites wrote it as one of the best theater books of the year because it really is. It's about science and it has a lot of physics in it, but it's really also heavily about innovations in theater and theater lighting. And Loie was an actress before she was a dancer, and she's from just outside of Illinois. There's actually like the house where she lived is just outside of Chicago.
Wow.
I remember you said
really
that. That's right. I went, oh, that's not far. Oops, a little freezing.
Just a little.
There you are.
Oh, you're back. We're all back.
Yay.
So, yeah, so this is cool. So you're going to enjoy your July off. No experiments, no publisher chats, no.
I do like TV science stuff every other week, so I'll still be doing that, but no.
Okay.
Oh no, I'll be doing this stuff, but no writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
My kitchen table will not have science experiments all over it for once. When
you should just build an edition for science.
I need it. Kitchen Pantry Scientist is not a made-up name. Like kitchen is always a mess.
Oh, You know what? You had an app. Is that still operational or is it not?
The app has not been operational for several years. It still
Okay.
exists, but it was too expensive. You had to keep rebuilding it every time they changed their it was in the Apple App Store. You had to keep working on it and rebuilding it. And the woman and I that made it, we had no funding. We made it ourselves. Like, she volunteered her time and I made videos and we put it together. So maybe someday it'll come back. I still think it was a great idea, but we just had no financial support for it. So
yeah, I mean, I remember, you said, oh, you should try my app, and I did. And it's so cool because, I could think when my kids were little, her app was really cool because, well, it still is cool, but not working so well. Yeah. But because you could just sort of design, so interactive. So you go, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And you click that, what experiments can you do for a 2-year-old and 4-year-old? Or you go, what have I got in my pantry, right? So you don't, because sometimes you want to do these science things, but then you have to go to the store and get this and get that and get this. So even though most of the things are stuff you have around home, you might not have an item here or there. So it was sort of cool because you could just sort of click and then the suggestions for experiments would come up.
Yeah.
Which was just
science app. It was a fun idea.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool, but also not necessary. So
yeah.
I
feel like kids are so, YouTube is great. I mean, you can't do the stuff like search by age or search by what's in my pantry, but kids, I think, are so good at going on YouTube and finding stuff to do that maybe they don't need the app. I don't know.
We have a friend of mine who made a comment that seemed relevant. And also, I've never seen this where we can show these things.
Yeah, look at that.
The video stream.
I can't read it. It's too small. Sorry.
That he says he was once at a National Science Center meeting, and one of the keynote speakers was making the argument that there's quite a bit of similarity between 3-year-olds and scientists, especially curiosity. And maintaining a sense of play, since we were talking about that scientists love their toys.
Yes.
I think that's true.
I think it's true too. So,
I think what's great about scientists is I think that scientists are people who never really lose their wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, their wonder and curiosity. I think that's really.
Yeah.
I think that's really, those are great characteristics to have.
Yes, and that the play is not some sort of detrimental thing. Playing is the thing that propels the science.
Once I went to it was a workshop. It was called like a sandbox summit. But someone proposed the idea, and I think it's really true that we work so that we can play. And scientists are kind of lucky because, they work really hard, but often when you find something really neat, your work is play. So it's very comforting.
That's right.
Well, you can hear that too if you listen to the way that they talk about things that they do when they start getting to the enthusiastic bits. They'll start to use vocabulary that's more like playing. It's the same vocabulary they work very hard to take out of the papers they send to physical review letters.
Yeah. I say that often in my, creative enrichment or whatever. I say, play with it more to see what happens, because it really is. Experimentation really is sort of play. What can I do now? What can I do now? What would be fun to try? Right?
That's right. That's right. Actually, I know we're at an hour, but I want to ask one more question. Is there an area of science where you go, that's not going to happen, like psychology for kids or sociology for kids or astronomy for kids? Well, astronomy for kids.
Macroeconomics for kids.
Yeah.
No, thanks.
No, I honestly feel like the possibilities are limitless because, like we talked about, some kids have so many different interests that what one kid finds boring, another kid will find fascinating. So, and I have done, one food science book. Maybe someday I'll do another one. I think that I think what's really cool too is teaching kids to see the science in the world around them. So, no, I don't think there are any limits to what kids can learn or enjoy if you teach it in the right way.
Right. You may not always be the one to write the book about it, but
That's true, actually. Yes. So so in my kitchen pantry series, I think I can talk about this. I think someone's going to write a math for kids. And I'm not a mathematician, so but I think it's really important because math is the language of science. So I think that's a really great thing. If you can get kids interested in math, it will certainly help them, take measurements and anything they ever want to do with science, right? So
yeah. Oh, I think of things. Oh, geology for kids. And, that would be fun.
Yeah. So I suspect. I mean, I don't know what will happen with this series, but hopefully people will embrace it, and then we can just keep doing more. So we'll see. And there are a lot of books that I am interested in that I feel like I could write, but then there are certainly some that I'm not an expert if they get more specialized. So especially someone who knows, the history of that science could write it and come up with cool projects. So we'll see.
Yeah, much better.
It's just that it's all up to the publishers. So we'll see.
Exactly. In the end, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I just want to say, by the way, I love that this is you.
Oh. Yeah. There's a funny story about that.
Is there? I think it's so great.
The first one that they drew was wearing I think like a skirt and little pumps. And I said, no, it needs to be jeans and sneakers. And my
exactly.
Messy. That wasn't me. I'm also not really quite that blonde, but maybe I was when they did the picture. I don't remember. My hair changes.
Anyway, it's awesome. And that's a good story because I would be like, I can't remember the last time I wore a dress to do science ever.
No. The whole thing about teaching science is, I think, too, that you want to be relatable. So
yeah,
you don't want kids to think that there's some, I don't know. It wasn't me, and it didn't seem to represent the way I do science. And everyone does science in their own way. So
that's right.
That's awesome. And
that's right.
We all have embrace our differences and have fun doing science, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, but thank you for having me on. I enjoy, so much love and thought goes into these books, and I really appreciate talking to scientists. I love talking to, people in the news media, but it's always 3-minute sound bites. Like how many bubbles can you make? And
I forgot to ask
great.
that.
And I am reaching people, and I do. They're great because they really do promote my books and let me always talk about the science behind whatever I'm doing. But
right.
It's fun to get it. I never have a chance to dig in deeper. So I really appreciate having this conversation.
Well, thank you for this books. I like the first one, and then the series now I think is making an excellent model for people who want to look at how to reach kids and spark an interest in science. Is very valuable.
Yeah, and pass on to your artist how much I love her work. I love it.
Kelly, I will. She is brilliant. Yeah, she's illustrating. She did the chemistry book. She did this book. She's doing the physics book as well. So when they asked me to write the physics book, I said, "Can Kellyanne do the?"
Yeah.
Please.
She's brilliant. So
it's a very important contribution. Yeah,
and my publisher, the art team, does such a good job. I'm very fortunate to work with all and my photographer Amber Procaccini. I'm very fortunate to work with all these people.
It's great. It's so wonderful. Well, Liz, thank you so much for coming back, and we'd love to have you back again because the physics book, right, Jeff?
Physics.
Well, we'll talk physics. Just don't ask me any questions that are too hard.
Never. No, of course not.
Okay, Liz, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us and for checking out Liz's books anytime you have a chance. All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.